Hello everyone, my name's Jack. Today we're going to be talking about the Mazda MX5 on iRacing. Hopefully give you some tips on how to go faster, how to win some races and have some success. I am not a professional racing driver, caveats up front, so don't take everything de facto. It might not be 100% as they teach it out of the textbooks. Having said that, I've had a reasonable amount of success in the MX5. BSR, British Sim Racers, MX5, I've won 3 championships. Not by being the fastest guy on the grid. I think the majority of my wins came from being consistent and from implementing some of the things I'm going to talk about today. So hopefully you will learn some things and have some success from it. Please let me know if you do have success, or alternatively, if you try some of the things that I'm going to talk about and you crash horrifically and lose every time, please do let me know. So let's jump right in. So, first thing is to set your sim up to give you, I don't want to say an advantage, but to give you an advantage, really. I mean, a lot of people drive iRacing to be 100% as realistic as possible. You know, how can I replicate real world racing as close as possible, get the best experience, and that's fine. I'd rather win. So here's how I set up the sim to give me the best chance of not making mistakes and just having the best opportunity to win races, essentially. So first thing, quite specific to the MX5, not applicable to many cars that are sequential in iRacing, but clutch aids. So definitely use manual clutch. Some people might not have 3-pedal setup. You need one. If you're going to win MX5 races, series, championships, you need a manual clutch. There's no way about it. Plenty of people say, I use auto clutch, I can win races, I'm just as quick. No. Maybe you can win some races, but that probably just means that there ain't a guy in the lobby that's fast enough to be able to beat you. Nah, let's start again. That's some bullshit. So first thing is manual clutch, definitely. There's a lot of people who say, well, I use the auto clutch, it's fine, I can win races. No, you need to use the manual clutch. On some tracks this is worth between 1 and 3/10 of a second per lap, which when you're right at the top of your game, between 1 and 3/10 is massive. That's the difference between winning or losing, a million miles. So definitely manual clutch. What that will allow you to do is shift quicker. The auto clutch in the MX5 is horrendously slow, so you hit the paddle, and if you keep your foot buried on the throttle, then you'll hear, I don't know, between half a second and a second's worth of limiter, and then it actually changes gear. If you use manual clutch, you can shift gear, I don't know, I don't want to assign an amount of time to it, but it's a lot quicker than the auto clutch. So definitely use that. And to go along with that, what I would say, or what I do anyway, is to short calibrate my clutch pedal. So if I press both my clutch and my throttle down now, and I'm going to release them, well, I'm going to try, because this is a very unusual thing to do, I'm going to try and release them at the same rate, and you can see as my throttle goes down, we're already at half pressure there on my throttle, and my calibration on my clutch hasn't moved at all. So that's still registering full. Keep going slowly. There we go, so about between a third to a quarter on my throttle pedal, or on my clutch pedal rather, is where it actually starts to reduce. So what you end up with is a really, really sensitive clutch pedal, which, if you're going to drive your MX5 to the hairdressers, which is what it was built for, then that's crap. You're going to stall every time you try and pull out of a junction. But we ain't going to the hairdressers, we're racing. All we want to do is change gear as fast as we can. So being able to have an absolutely instant clutch is a big advantage. Some people might look at this as that's cheating. Well, I don't think it is. I think it's using the available controls and the available calibrations to your advantage. There's plenty of times where I used to race with the full range of calibration, and you're in a situation where you've exited a corner next to another guy and you're level, and I want to try and change gear as quickly as I possibly can, and you slam the clutch down and shift, and it doesn't go in, you've missed a gear, and then you're 2/10ths back, and it's crap. So, short calibration, you know, sometimes you still do miss a gear, but that's all down to the timing of when you're doing things, and it really only happens when you're really, really pushing to get an instant shift, you know, like less than 1/10 of a second's worth of delay from being clutch engaged and you're going forward. Last thing to mention is, I've told you all to use manual clutch. Obviously, you're going to think, well, manual clutch, I need a H pattern shifter to go along with that. No, you don't. You can still use your paddles. It's going to be a bit unnatural if you learn to drive with a manual stick shift car. It's going to be something you might have to get used to. For me, I was sim racing before I was driving real cars, so something like this is easy to pick up. It's what I knew before I knew H pattern. So what it'll give you is a quicker shift. I mean, essentially it's a button, isn't it? It's an instant. Once you pass the point at which the button engages, then your shift clicks in. It's not like a H pattern where you've got a physical amount of movement. I mean, obviously you have physical amount of movement with your paddle, but it's nowhere near throwing from second to third, for example. How many times do people miss shift second to third? Maybe you go into fifth by accident because you've given it a bit too much welly, too excited, you want to pass that guy, and you throw it into fifth, and you've lost. So using the paddles, it's going to give you some more consistency, and I think it's just easier as well. It's easier and it's quicker. A lot of people again argue the immersion factor for a H pattern shifter, but I mean, if you were in it for the immersion and you didn't want every possible advantage you can get to try and win, then you probably wouldn't be watching this video. So paddles is fine. If you want to use a H pattern shifter, go ahead. But in my opinion, I think that's going to lose you some time. That time might be really small, but when the margins are as close as they are sometimes when you're racing, how many times do you see a photo finish race where the cars are level? If that was a 30-minute race and you were using a H pattern shifter and you could gain 1,000th of a second each gear change, maybe by using a paddle shifter, then that's no longer a photo finish. You know, it's those sort of really small gains that they all really do add up in the end. So it's definitely worth considering. Aside from the realism, a lot of people will hate me for saying that, but I'm far too competitive to really care about the whole realism thing. I mean, there are certain things that you do want to be realistic, and there are scenarios where you do want things to be realistic. If you're training, if you're using sim racing purely as a tool to train in the real cars, then yeah, you probably do want it as realistic as possible, which is fine. There are times where I change all of my settings and run things to be the most realistic in order to do that exact thing. But if you want to win races online, there is no reason not to take every advantage that you can get. So I think that is it in terms of controls. I guess we can talk about graphics a little bit. So my computer, I have a i5 8400 and GTX 2060. Not GTX, RTX 2060. Brand new. Really enjoying that. By no means a supercomputer, but it's good. It's a really good spec computer. It'll run anything pretty well. But as you can see, all of my graphics are pretty much as low as they'll go, aside from cars where I've got medium detail. Reason for that is that I want as little input delay between what I'm doing with my wheel and my pedals to my sim. Now there's a lot of people that run their graphics on ultra high and it'll look amazing and they'll get 61 frames a second consistently, which might be above their refresh rate, so that's fine to them. I get 60 frames a second, I'm not losing any frames, so why should I run it any lower? But just because you're getting 60 frames a second doesn't mean that your input delay is as low as it can be. And it's massively important. I think probably one of the most important things when sim racing is that the inputs that you give to your wheel and to your pedals happen as soon as possible on the sim. iRacing is pretty good for input delay. It's not the best. The very first sim that I raced was Live for Speed back in 2005. Our first 2005-2004, I signed up to Live for Speed, and since then nothing has matched the crispness at which that conveys your inputs in real life to in the sim. But iRacing is a pretty close second, in my opinion. But there are so many people that I see. And, you go to places and you use people's rigs, or you go to an event and you use some of the demo rigs, and the input delay is horrific. Like in cases you can. The classic test that I always do is to get in the car and saw like a madman at the wheel, and you can see the wheel in game. And if at any point the wheel center isn't where yours is, you've got a big delay. I mean, at times it's between maybe 0.2 and half a second's delay. I mean, I can't conceive how you could possibly drive a car to its limit with that much input delay. It's just bonkers. You can't do that. Not reliably anyway. Maybe over one lap out of 100 you can match the delay to what you should be doing in the sim. But if you want to race and you want to race close to other cars and you want to beat them, you need absolutely the minimum that you can get, which is why I run everything on low. I guess part of the reason why I run things so low is because we do streaming and recording. So I could probably get away with a little bit more than this, but this is the settings that I use to get no delay while I'm streaming. So definitely give that a try. And a final mention to field of view. So I very recently upgraded to just triple screens, which has been a revelation for me. I raced for, well, however many years it is since 2005, so 12, 13 years, 14 years almost, with one screen, and quite a wide FOV. So, God, what was it? Maybe between 75 and 85 field of view in degrees. So that's real wide. That's I can probably see my left-hand mirror on my one monitor. And I got used to it, and it was fine. But having switched to 3 monitors and done all the calculations, you put your monitor width and the view distance and the bezel and everything, and it gives you the right field of view. It took me, 2 or 3 laps to get used to it. But as soon as I got used to it, it's an absolute revelation. It changed my sim racing experience, not to be too dramatic, but it's such a big difference. And the consistency that I've gained is massive. I always, in all of my years of sim racing, I could put a quick lap in. I could be up there in terms of pace, but I was horrendous at being consistent. I couldn't do that same lap twice in a row. But now the field of view is right, and my brain sees what it thinks it should see. It's amazing. It just works. I did the classic example. We did the Bathurst 12-hour last weekend, 3 days ago as it was. I did 7 hours in the car, over 200 laps. I think I picked up not many incident points, less. I would say 5 or less. And the consistency that I could get wasn't from me as a driver being really skilled and being amazing. It was just it just felt natural. I could guarantee that if I was using my single monitor still and I had my 90 or 80 field of view in degrees, I wouldn't have been able to do that. It just really, it clicks and your brain works because you're so used to, you go drive a real car to work and back every day or wherever you go, or if you do, your brain gets used to what it should see. Get used to the depth and the perception of, here's a corner. How fast am I going? It's it's crazy. Anyway, I raced for so many years with one screen, and kind of kicking myself that I didn't switch a lot of years ago. But there we go. So I've rambled on for far too long about tip number 1, and that's getting everything set up right. Let's actually get in a car and do some driving. So I guess now we've got our manual clutch set up. If you've not used that before, let's talk about that for a little bit. A lot of people will say you need to heel and toe. I don't think that's 100% true. There are times where you do need to heel and toe. Classic example, Lime Rock Park, this corner, when going for 4th to 3rd, then definitely I will heel and toe every time. Generally, the rule is if you're braking in a dead straight line and you want to slow the car down as quick as possible, in the MX5 on iRacing, you don't need to heel and toe. Again, people might wildly disagree with that, but I don't think that's the case. We'll come round onto the straight and we'll do an example. But you can just stop the car without it. It does just work. So let's give that a go. Come around the final corner here. I guess as soon as we cross the start finish line, we'll brake as hard as we can. So that was 2 downshifts, obviously manual clutch, so hitting the clutch and downshifting, but no heel and toe. Car wasn't loose, car was dead stable because you're going in a straight line, so dead easy. You know, if one of the reasons why you haven't switched to manual clutch is because maybe you don't have as much experience doing heel and toe downshifts, that's fine. Obviously, if you can do that, it's great and it's useful in certain scenarios. But there are scenarios. I mean, I've done heel and toe for quite a while. I've done not a massive amount of real world driving, but a reasonable amount. I've done quite a few track days, driven road cars and race prepped cars as well, and I would say it's a lot more crucial in real life than it is on iRacing. But you can 100% get away with not doing it in heavy braking zones if you're going from 5th to 2nd, for example. You know, all of the BSR championships that I won, I wasn't heel and toeing in a straight line when I was braking really hard. The only thing that you do need to do is be smooth on the brake. Oh, on the brake. So if you're hitting the brake real hard, if you think Summit Point, if we choose from the selection of rookie tracks that the MX5 uses, turn 1 at Summit Point is kind of a 5th gear to 2nd gear corner, I would say. Maybe is it 2nd gear or is it 3rd gear? I think it's 2nd gear, but that's a good example of just really hard on the brakes, downshift without heel and toe down to 2nd, and then you need to make sure you're smooth coming off the brakes. So the MX5 as I hit puberty for the millionth time, is all about momentum. You know, it's a low power car. People talk about momentum cars. Go-karting is kind of a similar thing. You've not got 600 horsepower to get you out of a corner if you happen to exit that corner a little bit slow. So whenever you have a bad mid to late corner experience, for lack of a better word, in a momentum car, you're going to lose quite a lot of time. So you need to make sure that you're hitting good exits. The biggest thing in the MX5 for me, so the BSR series, a brief roundup of how it works. You do qualifying, 15 minutes qualifying, and then race 1 is the qualifying order, and then you've got race 2, 3 and 4 are all reverse grids of varying numbers. There's an amazing wheel of fortune that spins and it chooses a number between kind of 18 and whatever the max amount of cars is, and that's what the reverse grid is. So if you want to win a championship like that, you need to be able to pass cars consistently and safely, and the only way to do that is to be able to carry your momentum through corners. and to choose your opportunities so as to give you the best momentum out of them. So for example, if you're, say you're in 10th and you want to win the race, you think you've got the pace to win the race, and the guy in 9th position is right in front of you, you want to pass him, and there's a hairpin coming up, you can kind of chuck it up the inside, and that might slow you down quite a lot, that might slow you both down quite a lot. You might get the pass done, but it might cost you a second, half a second, and then you've lost the draft of the guy in front. So there's a lot of times where I'd be racing and there's a perfectly good opportunity at there's tracks where there's only so many passing places, and you might have one of those passing places and you think, I could chuck it up the inside of this guy and he can't defend that and I will get past him. Well, is that actually the best thing to do? It might not be, even though it's the default move that people would say is, this is a passing place, I should pass the car in front of me if I think I'm quicker than him at this point. Well, what if that's going to lose you both a second on your lap time? If you're trying to go from 10th to 9th, then that's fine, you've achieved your goal. But if you're trying to go from 10th to 1st, then absolutely no, let's not do that, because that's going to lose me a second on the guys in the pack in front, and that's so not worth it. So you need to make sure you're thinking about the passes that you're making in the grand scheme of the race. If it's a 30-minute race, you need to be thinking about, where am I going to be in 29 minutes time? Am I going to be able to get to the top 1 or 2 positions by that point of the race? And that's, if you're going to move through a pack of cars, it's a bit different when you're in 2nd and you want to try and pass the leader. Then maybe you do just throw it up the inside and you get in front of him. But if you really want to make a big move from 10th to 1st, you need to think about the knock-on effects of what you're doing. It's not all about passing the guy in front of you as soon as possible. If you race with that in mind, you ain't gonna win when you're coming from the back. You need to think about the long game. At the end of the day, if you've got a 15-lap race, the winner is the one that completes the 15 laps in the least amount of time. Forget everything else, forget the racing, forget the racecraft, forget whatever it is. If you get 15 laps done in the least amount of time, then you win. It's such a ridiculously simple thing to say and to think, but that's how it is. So if you're going to try and move through a pack by making really bad moves, and I don't say bad moves as in crashing into people and chucking them off, I mean bad moves as in it's going to cost you 1 or 2 seconds per lap to get past each car, you ain't going to win races consistently and you ain't going to win championships. That's just how it is. Let's talk about the final thing that I'm going to talk about in this video as I go off the track, and that's braking and corner entry. So in the MX5, as I've said, it's all about momentum. You need to carry your momentum through the corner and have as much exit speed as you possibly can. If we actually start concentrating on what we're doing a little bit and speed up. The way I enter corners and the way I go about getting round a track is that the least amount of inputs that you need to do to get round that corner is probably the fastest way. So if you're going round a quite wide corner, you don't want to be on the limits of the lock scrubbing your tyres. You need to give the car the least amount of things to think about, so to say, to get it around that corner. So if we're going down into turn 1, we're going to brake at the 2 board, a little bit slow on the exit, down a couple of gears and really smooth off the brakes. Now the MX5 is a bit of a unique beast. I certainly drive it different to however I drive anything else on iRacing, in that when you're braking you need to be really smooth. So you want to come off the brakes really smoothly, and ideally you want to be coming off the brakes as you're turning in. That'll give you the most amount turnage. There's a few people who might recognise that word. The most amount of turnage as you're going into a corner, and coming off the brakes as you do that. As you slowly come off the brakes, when you're on the brakes, obviously the weight of the car is transferred to the front, and the front tyres are the ones that do the turning. So you want to use that to your advantage. If you there's a lot of basic guides that you'll see about driving quick on sims or in real life that'll say you only want the car to do one thing at a time. You either want to be turning, you want to be braking, or accelerating. You really need to mix braking and turning on the entry of a corner if you want to go as fast as you possibly can. So, big thing. Let's not at the best place in the attack to try and demonstrate this. You can use the next corner. So this corner, really small amount of brakes and really smooth off it. And as we come off the brakes, we're going to turn in at the same time, and that's going to really rotate the car quickly. It's not going to make it slide. Obviously, if you do it too aggressively, then it is going to make the car slide. But you need to be smooth as you do it, and hit the threshold of where the grip runs out. You know, if you, as I said, if you do it too aggressively, it'll slide, and if you do it too gently, then you aren't going to get the maximum amount of grip and a maximum entry speed into that corner. But you need to find that balance between the two. And you know, the MX5, with it being, it's not a road car on the sim, but it's, you know, it's pretty wallowy, it's loose, it's soft. You can really play with the slip angle that you get through the corners. So you need to be right on the edge of oversteer when you're turning in. I think that's the quickest way to get this car into a corner. I mean, that's probably applicable to most cars. Generally, a tiny bit of oversteer on corner entry is where you want to be, but that's massively important for the MX5. If you're understeering into the corner, you know, it's so slow. There's so much time to be gained by being able to control the car really on the limit of where the grip is and where the oversteer is. You know, you watch a lot of the best MX5 drivers on iRacing. You maybe watch a replay or a broadcast, and you're in car with them, and their steering wheel doesn't ever move beyond, I mean, you can't see it on the sim, but how many degrees is that? 45 degrees. You can, I think you can probably get round most tracks, barring a really tight hairpin, with less than 45 degrees steering input, because you're using your feet to control the attitude of the car. You're not using the steering wheel so much. If you're having to turn the steering wheel and give it a really big turn to get round a corner, then I don't think you've used the weight transfer of the car effectively to get into that corner. So having said all of that, chatted a load of rubbish, the one thing I would recommend for being able to do that is jump in an MX5 in the Mark IV Global, the Global MX5 Cup car, take it around a track that you're familiar with, and spend some time trying to slide around all of the corners. And what you're looking for isn't the part where you're on the power and you're kind of power sliding through the corner. It's the entry that's the most important thing. And at the point where you can control that entry and that slight bit of oversteer, that is the feeling that you need to get used to be able to do really quick laps. So if we do an example, we're going to hit the brakes slightly, maybe not going fast enough there for a great one, but even then I wasn't going too fast, and I hit that brakes and the car wanted to slide. If I hadn't have given it the tiny bit of correction, the rear would have started to step out. Bit of a more pronounced example through there. Another one through this corner. If I try and make it slide, then it will. But you can see the amount of rotation that I got through the car by using the brake and by turning in at the same time. It's ridiculous. And that's where the time comes from. You know, you might do some laps in a practice lobby and there's a guy that's around Lime Rock. I mean, I haven't been lapping very quickly. I've done a 58.3 as my best. But if that was my best time and there's a guy doing 56s, how the hell is he doing that? I can guarantee he's doing that by controlling the rotation of the car using the brake. So last year I entered the Want to Race competition in the UK. Got to the grand finals and had a lovely chap, Tom Oliphant, racing driver, British touring car driver, gave a presentation, and one of the key things he said is that all of the best racing drivers, all of them, are the ones that are the best on the brakes. And I sat there in that presentation thinking I was Billy Big Bollocks, I'm a quick driver, I'm going to win this competition. No, crap. He said that, and it really dawned on me that that's so correct. I've raced in a lot of leagues. BSRTC, British Sim Racers Touring Car Championship. There are, the one that springs to mind is Ash Sutton. So British Touring Car Champion, he races in the BSRTC with us in the Kia Optima on iRacing, and you ask anyone in that league what is Ash Sutton good at, and the vast majority of them will say braking. You hit a braking zone and you're on the brakes and you're turning in, and he's 20 yards better than you every single time, and better than me. There are certain cars. I think in the MX5 I have a good chance against him. I've raced against him in the MX5, and it's gone both ways. I've won and I've lost, but it's in the touring cars. No way have I got a chance. He's so much better than me on the brakes, and that's something that I've registered. I need to get better at that. I'm gonna get better at that. That's where I need to work, and that is where I'm working. And definitely, since I've been doing that, I've had a really big improvement in my overall performance in all cars, really. So, it's easy to drive a car down the straight with your foot pressed to the floor. That takes no skill. Once you're at a corner and you're turned into that corner, it's quite easy. Once you're going the right speed to, I can get around this corner on the racing line. That's easy. But it's about being on the limit and about using the brakes to your advantage. I won't pretend to know the secret of it, because I don't know the secret of it, which is probably why I'm not a world champion in everything. Because knowing those sort of things and getting experience in those sort of things and being really good at braking is where the best of the best come out. But anyway, I've rambled on for long enough. How many laps have I been going for now? 21 laps. Right, okay, let's actually do one lap and talk about some of those things that I've mentioned. So down at the first corner, we're going to brake at the 2 marker-ish, down 2 gears, no heel and toe here. We don't need to, because we're going to point the car in a straight line. Smoothly off the brakes and turn in. Don't be afraid to be off the throttle mid-corner. There's a lot of people who say you need to be either on the throttle or on the brakes. I don't think so. Heel and toe through there. Could have carried a little more speed. And it's all about the exit. So trying to be as quick as we can through that exit. Had a little bit of oversteer there and oversteer there and had to lift. Tiny bit of brake on there, and then really harsh on the throttle inputs. So I briefly mentioned, but didn't finish my point about being smooth on the brake and on the steering on the MX5. The one thing that you can be, and probably should be, more aggressive with is the throttle. So if you're mid-corner, say we'll do an example here. We're going to brake smoothly, turn in smoothly, and as we get to the point where we can apply more throttle on the exit, we're absolutely going to kick the hell out of that throttle. Really crap example. Obviously, that was dead slow. But if you're mid corner, you're at the limit of grip for the car. To try and get it to that exit as fast as possible, you can slowly come onto the throttle, but if you give that throttle a big kick in a high-powered car, that ain't going to go well. You're probably going to spin. But in something like the MX5, where you've got less than 200 horsepower, you give that throttle a big kick and it's going to rotate the car slightly, but it ain't going to spin you. And sometimes that rotation is what you want. So everything everyone says about being as smooth as possible at all times, again, unpopular opinion, but nonsense. I didn't win races by being as smooth as I possibly could. I think out of most people on the grid, have probably one of the most heavy-handed styles of driving. But in the MX5 that works. You know, I ain't an F1 champion or a GT champion, probably for that reason. But in something like the MX5, you can stamp on the throttle and use that rotation to your advantage. So let's wrap up briefly. 3 things. Get your sim set up to give you the most advantage as possible. Realism is great, but if you want to win races, use everything you can. You know, it's not cheating, whatever people may think, it ain't. So use it if you want to do the best you can. Secondly, momentum. Absolutely a momentum car. You need to be able to carry as much speed through corners as you can, and particularly when you're passing people, you need to choose the correct opportunities to pass them. It isn't always the first available opportunity, but it's the one that's going to get you around your complete race distance the quickest. And finally, just being smooth on the brakes, but not particularly with the throttle. So you need to use your smooth braking and smooth turning to your advantage to get the car positioned rightly mid-corner. And then once it's right and you can get back on that throttle, get on it hard and use the rotation that it'll give you to your advantage to get around that corner. So I have talked crap for however long that is. That's quite a long time. Hopefully this helps you all. If it doesn't, let me know. If it does, let me know. Feedback is great. That's how we learn. That's how we get better. So yeah, thank you for watching. And there we are. That's some of the things that I think about when driving the MX5. Again, I ain't a professional racing driver, but I've done quite well in the MX5 in the leagues that I've raced in. So, you know, those are the things that I lived by, the things that I raced by that helped me do that. Hopefully that helps you too. So thank you. See you soon.